Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Profit Minds podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen 𝐏𝐻𝐻, creator of the Profit Minds Growth System, a unique blend of profit growth, productivity acceleration, and building robust business process for scale. In every episode, I interview entrepreneurs and small business owners from around the world with a unique story to tell. You can find the show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. Well, hello, everyone. Today, my guest is Tom Schwab, founder and chief evangelist officer of Interview Valet, a podcast interview marketing agency. And today, we're going to talk about how to leverage podcasts to grow your business. Welcome, Tom.
Steve, it's wonderful to be here.
So, well, as you know, the first question that I ask every guest, tell us your story. How did you get here?
It only makes sense in the rearview mirror. So today I'm an entrepreneur helping people get on podcasts to grow their business, right? And you're like, oh, clearly I didn't go to college for that.
Yeah.
So if we back up into it, by the grace of God and a clerical error, I got into the U.S. Naval Academy. I was a mechanical engineer, ran nuclear power plants on aircraft carriers. And then I went into the corporate world, right? And one built on the next. Learned a lot working for the Stryker Corporation, sold in orthopedics. I was in surgery most days, helping the surgeons put in artificial knees and artificial hips, and then started my own business. And to me, everything was an evolution, not a revolution, right? One built on the other. And my previous company was HubSpot's first e-commerce case study. And after I sold that, I was in a mastermind and people said, well, how did you grow it? And I said, oh, it was easy. It was, did it through guest blogs. But by 2014, blogging was past tense, right? Yeah. And I hypothesized that you could use podcast interviews for that. So we tested it. It worked well. And for the first few years, I'd give my elevator pitch and people would go, what's a podcast? So we started early, but it gave us a chance to understand the medium, to build the systems. And so when it really started to take off, when podcasting got hot, we were there. In COVID hit, then all of a sudden the bigger companies realized, wow, we could use this to talk to our ideal clients. And so that really helped. And then just within the last couple of years, about 2024, it became clear that AI was indexing podcasts. So every sort of generation has led to something new here. And I'm more excited about where I am in life and where Interview Valet is than I ever have been.
Yeah, that's a great story, and so many of us wind up in the place we are more out of happenstance than intentionality. So it's great, and the key is to take advantage of those opportunities, right?
Yeah, and everyone sort of opens another door, and I just know myself that if I was doing the same thing for 40 years, right, I would be bored out of my mind. I'm always learning something new. And I remember my daughter one time came to me and she had to tell in middle school what she was going to be when she grew up. And she had a list of, I don't know, 200 things. And she had to pick what she wanted. And I said, honey, you're going to do 5 things and 4 of the 5 aren't even on that list yet. So don't worry about it.
That's absolutely right. So what's the key to being to getting in onto podcasts? What is the thing that works the best?
I'm going to push back on that question a little bit because so many people will say, how do I get on a podcast? Well, that's not tough, right? Just go on Facebook and say you want to go on a podcast, right? You'll get all kinds of invitations, but most people don't just want to be on a podcast. It's a hobby, right? It's an ego thing. They want the results that come from being on a podcast. So I always say, if you want better answers, ask better questions. So how do I get more book sales from that? How do I get more leads? How do I get found by AI? And the big thing today is to be seen where it builds you authority and to have that content that's not just on your site, but on other people's site. So people are looking for exposure there. They're looking for credibility. They're looking for that transfer of authority. So I always say when you start with that, that gives you a great framework to look at podcasts differently, where it's not just, oh, more is better, but no, better is better. And so with that, think about your ideal clients, right? Those people that you resonate with. What podcasts are they listening to? You can ask them. There's databases out there where you can look at that and start to really focus in on it, right? It's not this idea of how can I be on millions of podcasts, right? There's a firm out there that's saying that they'll pitch you to 3.5 million podcasts. I don't know how they can do that because there's only 400,000 that are live and 100,000 that take guests. But it's not a numbers game, it's a focus game. And so look at that. Ask your clients what podcasts they listen to. What podcasts do you listen to? And start from there.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point, right? Because you're not just trying to get on a podcast just to get on a podcast. You want to get on a podcast for some end, right? And so the question is, why?
Start with the end in mind and back in from that. And we both come from a technical background, right? And I always look at it as what are we optimizing for? And so many times I see people will get all these emails that say, we can get you more leads. We can get you more sales calls. And I love what you're doing, with Profit Minds, because you're focusing on how do you maximize for profits or optimize for that? Because to me, it's not just the money, right? But it's the impact you're making with that, the happiness that everything goes with that. And if you can optimize for that, then you can start backing into it. And I look at that as one of our clients, and I learned so much from our clients. He said that he rejected the idea of the sales funnel, right? This idea that he's going to have 1,000 people come in and one client comes out. He's like, no, I want to do the sales cylinder. Let me talk on an interview. I'll get 5 people that come and have a discussion with me. 4 of them become clients. He says, it's much more efficient for me and for them.
Yeah, that's really, I think, a critical thing here that people don't seem to understand, right? If you have to talk to 1,000 people to get one, that's an awful lot of extra work, right? Okay, yeah, AI can help you with that, but it's still an awful lot of extra work.
And that model may work if it's completely automated, if it's, selling a widget. But if there's any humans that have to be involved, right? Could be sales development reps. It could be the founder, who's ever doing your sales. It's hard to really scale that up. It becomes incredibly costly on there. So better to optimize for profits and impact than just activity.
Yeah. So let's talk about the sort of those alternatives, right? The kind of marketing that you're talking about. We talked about this a little bit beforehand. You call it nearbound marketing. That's a really interesting term. I've heard inbound and outbound, but nearbound's a new term for me. So why don't you define for our listeners what do you mean by nearbound marketing?
Yeah. So outbound is where I'm going to pick up the phone or send emails to all these people, right? Because I bought a list. Inbound is, well, they already know me, so they're going to come towards me. There's a gap in between that. And that's what's referred to as nearbound. So the people that are in my orbit know about me, right? That's inbound. But how do I expand that out? And a lot of that can be through centers of influence, right? I would guess that most people listening to your podcast did not subscribe and listen today because it's like, oh, Tom Schwab is on the show. No, they're like, oh, Dr. Stephen has always brought me great information. I like that. So I am tapping into your orbit there and sort of that nearbound thing. And there's great ways to do that. Like one of our clients came to us and he told me they do a software recruiting as a service business. And I'm like, okay, these are the kind of people that you want to talk with, right? And he's like, no, I want to talk with EOS implementers. And I said, but they're not your client. And he's like, no, but they are my best referral source because every one of them has 10 clients that would be my client. So I can go there, talk with them, and then they tell others about me. And it's this idea of, I remember a friend of mine that was in mergers and acquisitions, and he said it took him as much time to pick up a penny as it did to pick up a dollar. So he had to go after bigger companies. And with this Nearbound, it's the same thing of how can I go to those influencers? How can I tap into new networks there? So it's an interesting way of doing it. And I believe it's a lot more efficient than just yelling to everybody on social media or just selling cold emails, right? You can transfer that authority from that thought leader onto you.
Yeah. And the people that are in my orbit, right? Those people know me, they see me as an authority. And so because I'm talking to you, that, or whoever else is on my podcast, right? Um,
Exactly.
that gives them an advantage with my circle.
It does. And a client of mine called it, was it Warren Buffett Marketing? And I said, what's Warren Buffett Marketing? And Warren Buffett had a principle that he would not invest in anything he didn't understand. Now, he missed out on Apple, but he's made a whole lot of money along with it. And this gentleman said he's doing Warren Buffett marketing now because he's like, if I can't understand how something works, I'm not going to invest in it. And he's like, for a decade, I've been chasing this SEO algorithm, and now they tell me it doesn't matter anymore. He's like, I know when I talk with the right people, when I get introduced by the right people, I get business from it. And he's like, that could be going to the country club and getting introduced there. It could be going to the Rotary Club and speaking there. But today, with the internet, it's going on a podcast, getting introduced by the host, and then having that discussion. So it worked. It worked 100 years ago. I swear it's going to work in the future of tapping into those existing relationships and getting that transfer of trust.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I don't know how many different groups I've been in where, the goal is know, like, trust, right? And you have to get to know people a little bit. You have to understand who they are, what they do, get a chance to get to know them and like them a little bit. And then that builds toward the trust. And then once you do that, then you can start talking about business.
Yeah. And even not only people knowing you, but AI knowing you now too, because people aren't going to Google anymore. They're going to the AI, and AI knows all about us from the conversations we've had. And when we start to say, hey, I'm having this problem, what solutions would you have? If they know you from all the content that you've been putting out there on the internet, they're going to recommend one, maybe two people. And it won't be, here's a list of 100 people that I think would be great. It'd be like, no, I think Dr. Stephen would be great for you because of these reasons. And it sort of gets back to that sales cylinder as opposed to the inefficient sales funnel.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that people we haven't quite made the shift yet. An awful lot of people are coming to me to learn how to use AI, and that's great. But, once you learn how to use it, then you also need to learn what are the implications of all of the changes that are happening throughout the market because of AI. One of the challenging things, of course, is that we're flooded with marketing, right? Because AI's made it so much easier to create all this content. Whether it's good or not that's a subject of some debate, right? But the volume of marketing has gone up.
The volume's gone up, and don't you think we're all getting deaf too?
Yes.
From the standpoint, I've heard it referred to as AI slop or AI fatigue. And I hit spam on more emails now than I do reply. And there's something that people are talking about now is proof of life, right? So if there's an email, do I really know it's from you, or did you just scrape something from the internet? And so it's this idea of, if it uses a semicolon, it probably didn't come from me. I've never used a semicolon correctly in my life, right? And so there's this idea that in this world where everybody thinks, oh, it's AI generated, if you can hear or have a human conversation, that can be so much more powerful. And even from the AI standpoint, right? It's training on content, but it realizes that I think I heard that it's like 70% of the internet right now is AI generated. And
Oh
so,
my goodness.
yeah. And there's a thing called model collapse or digital decay. When AI trains on AI, it's like making a copy of a copy of a copy, and it gets worse and worse. So it's always looking for human content. And it largely believes correctly that most podcasts are human content. So that's why it's indexing all of this.
Well, that's a really good point. I mean, I've heard good things about Notebook LM in terms of, creating a podcast, but I would never watch the podcast, right?
There's something about it where it's like it's functional, because I've heard
Yeah.
them and done them.
Hmm.
It's functional, but it's sort of expected, right? It's the summary of everything that's already known, not the ideas of what's coming, right? What are new ideas? How do you see the world? How do you see problems? Those are things that are uniquely human. And when somebody talks in complete and full sentences, it almost causes me to lose trust, right? People talk over each other. I'm from Chicago. I dropped the G on my INGs. It's just those little things we can pick up that is like, oh, that's a human. I like that.
Yeah. It's so important to make that human connection. Uh, and of course, the other thing that happens here is that, you and I are having a real dialogue, and that it doesn't go perfectly, right? But but that's part of the human experience.
And that's what makes you listen to the conversation, because you don't know where it's going. There's that human aspect of it. Um, I heard somebody said that if what was it? If AI existed back at the time of um, debating whether or not the Earth went around the sun or the sun went around the Earth, all the information there would say that no, everything we know right now, the the sun goes around the Earth. That was known information, right? And it's sort of that same thing of AI tells us what we used to know, but not where we're going. And to me, those are interesting conversations that make me think. To me, a viral podcast interview is not how many likes or shares it gets, but when somebody listens to it in the morning and then they bring it up at lunch, and that night they're with their spouse and it comes up in conversation. Now there's an idea that is bouncing from one medium to another.
Right. Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about your service at Interview Valet. What is it that you do? What is it that makes you different? Because there are other places you can go to get help landing podcasts. What is it that you do that makes your business special and different?
We really focus on the interview marketing aspect of it, right? Just getting on a podcast, that's what most people focus on, right? And it's an activity and it's a numbers game, right? You might get results with it, you might not. I'm an engineer. We've engineered this. So we work with a lot of B2B companies, thought leaders, different brands that are doing, they want to be known as a category of one, right? The only choice. So we've got a team of 20. We've got the relationships with the podcast hosts, and we're really working with the clients to say, what podcast would be ideal for you based on data. We're helping them craft their message, because you don't want to say the same thing on every podcast, right? Then we're preparing them for every podcast interview, value their time and their money. So we prep them for each one. And we're even giving them feedback afterwards and letting them or helping them repurpose that content into the shorts and the reels. We really see this as a marketing channel and one of the most powerful marketing channels right today, where people are actually listening in, not just tuning out. So we've got a team of 20. I always say my microphone makes me sound great, but my team makes me look great. One of the little secret things in our industry, it's usually somebody in the US that's selling you, and then it's people overseas that are doing the delivery. And there's great people overseas, but there's a cultural difference. So I'm very proud that all of our team is in the United States, and about 2/3 of them are military spouses.
Oh, that's great to be able to help in that way as well. So talk a little bit about again, we've sort of touched on the whole marketing aspect of what you do with the podcast afterwards. So talk to us. You mentioned the shorts, you mentioned the reels. What are the kinds of things that people should do with the podcast content once it's created?
Yeah. And I believe that more is not better, better is better. And there's so many people in our industry saying, just do more podcasts, right? Just do more, more, more. Well, don't do more if you're not getting results from it. And so first figure out how to get those results, figure out the right audiences. And then after you've done an interview, get the most out of it. And so that can be repurposing the content into shorts and reels and images, right? If you wanted to get in front of that audience, that Nearbound idea, if you wanted to get in front of them one time on the podcast interview, why wouldn't you want to get in front of them once a week, once a month, whatever it is, on their social media? And look at it as the start of that relationship, not just a once transaction. And so we always teach and we ask all of our clients to do this. That once a podcast goes live, you take that content and promote it to your audience and tag the host. Because, when you do that, you show up in front of their audience again. So it should be a working together on this. And I am amazed all of the content that you can get from one interview. We've got some clients that hire us just because they want the content, right? They, previous to COVID, they would send a film team out to get B-roll footage and get the CEO talking and everything. And during COVID, they started to say, how could we do this without the travel? And so we started to work with them on podcast interviews. They never went back. They just looked at it and said, it's so much easier for the executive, for the team, just to do it through podcast interviews. So I always encourage people, get more from every interview. Don't just do more interviews.
Yeah, I was talking to a buddy of mine, another former Intel employee who appears on podcasts a lot, and he said he takes the interview and he turns it into an ebook. He takes the content, or rather than making it, he makes it first into an article and then into an ebook, and then can send that out as well.
I'll give you a creative one that we have done for ourselves and our clients, right? After you've been on, we figured out that 15 was the critical value. After that, it didn't change much. But we'd take 15 interviews and we'd analyze those through AI and say, what's my tone of voice? Now, big companies, Intel, the big Fortune 500 companies will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to come up with this tone of voice report. What do we believe? What are our core stories? What are our best mediums? Almost like they've got the same way for color and logo. They've got a tone of voice report. And that's why you can go and listen to an Intel commercial and it sounds different than an Apple commercial, right? There's that tone of voice with it. And you can figure that out through interviews and then having AI look at them. And now with that, you can give that to your team and say, this is what we talk about as a company. Or you can give it to a copywriter and say, I want you to write the copy for my website, but this is the tone of voice that we have, right? So there's so many great ways that you can use that. It's already created. It's already captured digitally. It's just we're limited almost by our creativity on how to get more out of that.
That's a fascinating idea, because of course it also means you can take the content and the stories that you've told that may or may not actually appear on your website, the testimonials and all of those kinds of things that have come up throughout those interviews, where you're just talking, and now you have good stories, you have what's important, what comes up a lot. Those are the kinds of things that you want to make sure wind up on your website. That's a brilliant idea.
And it's something we do with all of our clients now, as long as they've had, a significant number of interviews. And we'll get to the kickoff call and they're like, how do you know all of this about me? Like, because you've said it all, right? We just listen to that and you can figure out what their point of view is, their key stories, their disruptive statements. And those are all the things that a copywriter needs, a virtual assistant needs, an assistant needs, even a sales rep needs. And the great part is you've already created the content. All you have to do is get that interview and really mine it for the gold that's in there.
Wow, that's brilliant. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I'll show you the best way, because this gets asked at the end of most podcast interviews. The studies say that you should send them to one place and give them 3 ways to say yes, right? So if you go to Interview Valet with a V.com/Profit Minds. I'll have all the information there. There's an assessment, right? 10 questions. Will podcast interview work for me? I wrote a book. You can buy it on Amazon, but if you go there, I'll send you a copy. If you're outside the States, I'll email you a copy. And then even there's a calendar scheduling link there. All my social media, my calendar. If you'd like to talk with me about how you could leverage targeted podcast interviews to grow your business, just go to interviewvalet.com/Profit Minds.
That's great. So thanks so much, Tom. And that concludes our show. Thanks so much to my guest, Tom Schwab. He's the founder and chief evangelist officer of Interview Valet, the podcast interview marketing agency. And I hope you learned something about how to leverage podcasts to grow your business. I know I did. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Profit Minds podcast. This is your host, Dr. Stephen 𝐏𝐿. Please visit www.profitminds.net for other episodes or to contact me. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others. Thanks for listening. Have a grateful day.